Hi, this is Seth Breedlove with Small Town Monsters, and you're listening to the Monster Guys podcast.
Welcome to a Monster Guys podcast extra. I'm here with C. Michael McGannon. My name is DC McGannon. We're going to start doing this each month, an extra that supports our main podcast. Michael, I'm pretty pumped about it because just like tonight, we're talking with Seth Breedlove, director, producer, owner of Super fun guy, Small Town Monsters film company, does documentaries of some really creepy and really cool stories. We may, though, on a podcast extra, have a folklore storyteller, an expert. We may do something on a creepy phenomenon that goes along with something maybe we talked about in one of the main podcasts. Who knows? This is just going to be one of those extras that's going to be cool, going to give you something extra to listen to. The format we've gone to, we've got a lot of feedback. Everybody's loving what we're doing this year with the podcast as we continue to grow. But one thing I hear is we still want more. So at some point we have to sleep because we're also writing a lot of books. I think we've got some 9 or 11 titles that we're producing this year alone.
I feel like it's more than that.
Yeah, so we've got to sleep and eat at some point, but we do want to give you some extra and give you some fun things to chew on. So like I said just a minute ago, we've got Seth Breedlove on this episode, but if you'll remember, just a couple weeks ago, we released episode 32 of the Monster Guys podcast, where we interviewed Lyle Blackburn about the Boggy Creek Monster, also talked to him about the Lizard Man, and a little bit about the Mothman. And you're going to hear more about that in just a couple of minutes, and I think, Michael, that's got your ears perked up on that after talking to Seth.
You know, everybody that listens to this podcast knows that we talk about some pretty bizarre creatures and
love
phenomena.
Love them, can't get enough of them.
And
how you like that rhyme?
I like it. It works. Bigfoot and creatures like Bigfoot are interesting, and to me, they've become fascinating, especially after talking to people like Troy Hudson and Lyle Blackburn. But creatures like the Mothman and something that we've looked into, and I hope we'll cover soon, the Dogman. Mm-hmm. These are
stop giving away our secrets.
These are more bizarre, and these are just crazy to listen to.
Yeah. So you're going to hear more about that. We don't want to spoil it, couple of cool secrets that Seth let us in on during our interview with him about what he's got coming up in the works. But before we get to our talk with him, one of the big things we want to do this week is a giveaway. We haven't done a giveaway in a while on the Monster Guys podcast. I think maybe even as far back as when we started our fairy tales story podcast, or maybe before that when we were doing a whole month on yokai with Matthew Meyer and Zach Davison.
That was well over a year ago, wasn't it?
Not quite. I think pretty close, though. Maybe it was. I don't know.
I think so, because actually today, if I remember correctly, I got a notification that today was the year, like a year ago today, we released or were marketing the Kitsune episode. And I think that was towards the end of that.
Holy cow. That's been a while.
It has been.
We've done a lot of stuff since then. Well, okay. So this month, we're going to do a giveaway. Here's what we're going to do. We just interviewed Lyle Blackburn about the Boggy Creek Monster. We've got his first book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, bestseller. And we've got his latest book, Beyond Boggy Creek, In Search of the Southern Sasquatch. And we're not going to stop there, because after tonight, you're going to want this as well. We're picking up the documentary film, The Boggy Creek Monster, which was directed and produced by Seth Breedlove, who we interviewed tonight from Small Town Monsters, but Lyle Blackburn helped produce that and actually narrates it, and you'll see him doing interviews with a lot of the local people in Fouke, Arkansas during the documentary. So what I'm considering this to be is kind of the definitive collection on the Boggy Creek Monster, the Fouke Monster, and we're giving it away.
That's a whole lot of giveaway.
That's a lot of giveaway.
Is one person getting all of this? That's a big package.
Yeah, I think the one person is getting all this. And here's what I might do, because we can only send this out within the U.S. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little further, and I'm making this up as I go. So you might hit me later, but for our UK or our out-of-country listeners, and I know you guys are out there and we love you and we're trying to figure out ways to show you the love as well, I'm going to do ebooks. How about that?
That works.
The ebooks, that way I can send them, and it doesn't cost me $300 to send them over the sea, over the water, but you still get a copy of those books. So I'm going to get the ebooks. We'll do it by, I can't remember how we do it, by code or whatever. We'll talk to the experts about that. Get the codes for that, for downloads, and send that to you by email. Here's how you can get this stuff. This very, very cool stuff is we should sign up for our newsletter at themonsterguys.com. That's one way. Go to themonsterguys.com, sign up for our newsletter. You're automatically entered. Okay. The other way is go throw us a tip in the tip jar at our Patreon site, patreon.com/themonsterguys. You can double enter, but if you do both of them, be awesome. Because this stuff is awesome enough to double enter.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, sign up for our newsletter and go sign up and throw us a little bit of support over on Patreon. You're automatically double entered into the giveaway. What we're going to do is wait through the end of the month. At the end of the month, after February is done, it's a short month, so you don't have to wait for very long. We'll do that random drawing thing like we did last year with our yokai giveaway. Then we'll notify you, post it on Twitter, Facebook, and all that kind of good stuff. Unless you don't want us to post your name, and we'll respect that. But we want to get you the stuff. So you've got 2 books from Lyle signed. You've got Seth Breedlove's Boggy Creek Monster film documentary, which is amazing. We just watched that last night. We talk about that in the interview and really enjoyed that film.
I really enjoyed just even the visuals.
Yeah, the visuals, the music.
Yeah,
the music was, oh my gosh, I want the soundtrack. I don't even know if we talked to Seth about this, but I think the soundtrack is available. We need to get our hands on that because that to me is writing music right there.
Again, I don't want to do spoilers, but I think he was talking about one of their upcoming projects, and you can find out more about that on their Kickstarter, but
yeah,
you'll hear about that later.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got those 2 books and the film for our U.S. listeners that we'll send out to you if you win the giveaway. Or if you're overseas, don't not sign up for it because we're going to send you the digital copies and they're just as exciting. So good times this month. We're just going to try to have some fun with it. Tonight's episode is a podcast extra interview with Seth Breedlove of Small Town Monsters. I know he's got his website, smalltownmonsters.com, but he mentions in the website best way to stay in touch with him and updated right now is through their Facebook site, Facebook, and I think he said it was SML Town Monsters.
Yeah.
So check that out. But anyway, Michael, we're having some good times. We've got some really incredible stuff coming up on the Monster Guys podcast. We've got some more stories coming on our yokai podcast and our fairy tales podcast. So we're just going to keep having fun here at the Monster Guys podcast. Let's break now. Go to and this is a short one. This is, I think about maybe between 20 and 30 minutes long, a talk with Seth. Really fun guy, really down to earth. And we talk about his films, his experiences as a filmmaker, as a cryptid researcher, and where he's going next. I'll give you a hint. The next film he's got coming out is about the Mothman, but then on the heels of that is something that is really cool, really bizarre, and he tells us that. He gives us some insight. So without further ado, here is Seth Breedlove. Seth, welcome to the Monster Guys podcast. How you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
You are the big cheese at Small Town Monsters. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was the so-called brains behind the operation. That is
okay.
me.
Tell us a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about Small Town Monsters. We're going to talk about some of your documentary films. We just interviewed Lyle Blackburn about the Boggy Creek Monster documentary film that you did with him, and we'd like to talk about that, but we'd like to talk about some of your other work as well. So give us some insight, tell us who you are, and a bit about Small Town Monsters.
Yeah, Small Town Monsters was a book proposal that I had originally put together back in 2013. And originally, my idea was to do kind of a guidebook to some of America's strangest and most culturally celebrated monster stories. And most of those, if not all of them, well, no, most of them were Bigfoot related, except for Mothman, which was in my original proposal. That proposal got unanimously rejected by pretty much every publisher I sent it to. And about a year later, I decided why not turn one of those cases into a documentary. And originally, the documentary was basically going to be a little 20-minute 25-minute YouTube short that we were just going to post on a YouTube channel and kind of go from there. And we had very low expectations for what we were going to accomplish. That movie was called Minerva Monster, and it ended up gaining a lot of traction locally here in northeastern Ohio. It eventually gained, like, I think locally it's pretty well known. Like, if you're in this area, you can talk to someone, you know, like, mention Minerva Monster, and most people locally are well aware of it now. But outside of this part of Ohio, unless you're part of the Bigfoot community, you're probably not familiar with it. But it did set us on the track of, like, you know, let's continue doing this. Let's continue making more movies like this and kind of bring our own style and things to it. And, you know, like, part of the journey for me has been learning how to make movies. I've been a film fan since I was a kid. That was what I wanted to do. When I was graduating high school, I wanted to go to film school and go to New York Film Academy and learn how to be a director. But I never did that. So this is kind of like my window back into, I guess, my dream from my youth. So after Minerva Monster, we made Beast of Whitehall, which was about a Bigfoot case in upstate New York. We followed that up with Boggy Creek Monster that we made with Lyle Blackburn, and now we're working on the Mothman of Point Pleasant. And following that, immediately, actually, we're probably going to be shooting the next movie before we're even completed editing on Mothman. But we're making a movie called Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. It's going to be a little bit of a departure for us. It's going to be more about UFOs and more modern activity, and it's going to be a really kind of bizarre movie, but it's fitting because it's the next trilogy of films we're making, starting with Mothman, is subtitled High Strangeness. So these are going to be like 3 really bizarre kind of cases, and that story fits into that motif, I think, really well. So that is the quick and dirty look at what Small Town Monsters is.
Those are super fascinating topics, obviously, that you're covering. Michael and I last night watched the Minerva Monster and Boggy Creek Monster, and then earlier this afternoon with the other half of my family, we rewatched the Boggy Creek Monster and watched the Whitehall. Is it the Whitehall Monster?
Beast of Whitehall.
The Beast of Whitehall.
Beast of Whitehall.
Yeah, so
that's cool.
Loved every one of them. You can definitely see your progression as a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your directorial style, the quality of film, everything about it just keeps getting better and better. I think out of the 3 that I've watched so far, I think Whitehall and Boggy Creek are my favorites. Enjoyed the discussion about Minerva, especially the story where they were sitting there throwing rocks back and forth, and that poor girl gets pegged in the face with that rock. It was disturbing, but what an interesting story, because it was a very personal encounter.
Yeah, and that story about the rock getting thrown is, to me, that was the most outlandish. I don't know why I drew the line at that story, but that was the most outlandish kind of account in that movie for me. When Howie told me that story, I was like, it seems like something that was made up. And then this past summer, the daughter of the girl who got pegged between the eyes with the rock was at the Minerva Monster Day event that we put on out in Minerva a couple years in a row now. And she actually corroborated the story. Her mom was there, the lady who'd actually gotten pegged between the eyes with a rock.
Wow.
And she corroborated it, and that was the 3rd person I've had corroborate that story. It means a lot to hear you include Beast of Whitehall as one of your favorites, because that's my baby. Like, Beast of Whitehall is my baby.
Yeah.
Of the 3.
Well, it had some really great, and one of the things I like about what you're doing with your films is you're talking to the local people, you're telling local stories, you're going into the communities. We're getting to know the people, we're getting to know their towns, not just a spectacular film about a monster and not just overloaded with special effects, but we're getting to know those stories, those people, the history, and the effect that these encounters are having on those people. And for me, that's the meat of the story. So I really enjoy your approach to that. Stepping back for just a moment, so basically when you started this, you took failure and turned it into a massive success with what you're doing with your company. As a publisher and author, I certainly understand rejection. There's no shortage of that in this industry, but you flipped that rejection on its head, started making movies instead of books, and it's taken off from there. And now, like you said, you're just kind of stepping over your own feet in your next project. So if I'm not mistaken, you told me the other day that you just launched a Kickstarter, I think maybe last week, for one of your films,
Yeah.
and within a day or two, it was fully funded and still growing. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, this is actually how we fund the production of most of our movies. We launched one with Minerva Monster, and it was successful, and then we launched with Boggy Creek Monster, and I really did not think we would top Boggy Creek because we set the goal for Boggy Creek Monster at $9,000, which, if you know anything about indie film, that's still nothing.
Yeah.
Like, to travel all the way to Arkansas with a
Dude,
crew
you're
of
still
guys
eating PB&J and ramen noodles on that.
Right. No, we really were. So those two were really successful, though, but we launched this one last Thursday night, and in an hour and 51 minutes on the dot, we had reached 110% of our goal, which was $9,500. And that's $9,500 to fund the next two movies.
Wow.
So and the movie the Kickstarter just hit 16. It's almost at 17 as of tonight, and it's not even been 7 days yet. So
nice.
And it runs all the way through the end of the month. So
okay, well, real quick, tell us where we can find that project. If our listeners want to go support it, where do we go to find that?
If you go to Kickstarter.com and you just put in Mothman in the search tab, that's the first thing that'll come up. I mean, we're like the first Mothman project. To actually like give the URL is next to impossible because there's so many dashes, and
right.
the title of the Kickstarter is really complicated because it's, Kickstarter for both of the next two films. So it's like the titles of both of those. Yeah. And it'll run through then. And we've already reached our first stretch goal, which was signed mini posters for Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. So if anyone knows anything about Kickstarter, once you reach your initial goal, you can set stretch goals.
Right.
And with each stretch goal, you add like an additional reward for everyone that's backed. So it's no obligation on anyone else's part that's already backed. It's just like as we reach more and more goals, we're adding more and more rewards for free, essentially. So we reached that one, and we're almost at like 20K. We're going to give out free soundtrack CD for the Mothman, which Brandon Dalo is the guy that does the musical scores for all of our movies. And he's kind of on the same track I am, except from a musical standpoint, where his music just continues to improve from film to film. And his soundtrack that he's putting together for this Mothman movie is amazing.
That's actually very exciting. And going back to the original three and then moving forward to your next two documentaries, like DC said, you can definitely see a progression in the filmmaking and the production. Boggy Creek, we started with that movie, and we both stopped and said, visually, this is actually stunning. This is great. You can tell it's not chintzy or cheap. It looks great. And the music for all of them as well really stood out to me, especially. It was very good music. It was very soothing at some points, but it hit all the right notes for those more tense stories and moments.
Yeah, he's awesome, and he can do kind of anything. He learns all this. I mean, we're on this, like I said, we're on the same path as far as the way we're moving from project to project goes. Like he's learning different instruments. So he'll pick up, like when he picked up Boggy Creek, he just picked up a banjo and started learning how to play the banjo. And that's why you get that really cool, like I think the opening song to Boggy is so cool, the title sequence and the song and the way it segues into that little Hey Travis Crabtree at the end. He's awesome.
If you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have been able to tell, because it's listening to that opening for Boggy Creek, it definitely set the mood, and it took me back to some old really fun survival horror video games. So it definitely gave that creepy feel.
Nice.
Tell us, Seth, out of all your films you've done so far, what was your favorite one to work on and why? Can you pick one out?
Yeah, I mean, Whitehall's my favorite. And like I said, it was my baby because Whitehall was literally just Brandon and I, and then my dad, when we actually went to film the interviews. There's a really tangled, bizarre story behind the making of Beast of Whitehall that involved a falling out with my former producers and half the movie getting taken hostage and then trashed, and I had to go back and refilm the whole movie. But it ended up being my absolute favorite project to work on because, like, I don't know, the experience of working on that, where if you look at the behind the scenes photos, it's just Brandon and I standing in like Abear Road Field with these other two guys, and I've got a shoulder mount with my Next BG camera sitting on it and like a dead cat windscreen over my Rode mic. And I mean, it's as run and gun amateur hour filmmaking as you can get. But I watch that movie now, and even technically, we're much more adept technically, and we're continuing to get more and more, better with each project when it comes to all these technical technical things, but when I watch Whitehall, I still think, well, that's crazy, because like we shot that movie in basically a day and a half. We showed up in Whitehall at 2:00 in the afternoon, threw the drone up downtown, shot our downtown aerial footage with the drone, ran into town, shot the mayor's interview, ran out to the cabin where we were staying and shot the interview with the couple who were in the movie at the very end. And then the next day we shot like 4 interviews back to back to back. And then that was it, like, and we came back to Ohio, and the editing process and the post-production process was just Brandon and I. And then we had Matt Harris and Maz Adams doing sketches, and then Sam Sheeran came in and did our posters later. But it was really like, I put my dad as an executive producer on the movie because there was no one else. Like, there's no one else making that movie. Yeah. It was really Brandon and me, and then my dad drove us to the Adirondacks, and he would stand out in the hot sun holding a reflector shield, to get lighting. And my dad's like 70 years old, so it was a little tiring for him, but like, I don't know. That movie is unbelievable. I did have a blast shooting Boggy, but Boggy was like a boot camp experience, or I guess more like a summer camp experience. Right. Like when it was over, we were like, that was awesome. But while it was going on, we were completely drained and exhausted and grumpy and irritated with each other, and
I'm sure
all
the
that
humidity
kind of stuff.
Didn't help.
Yeah, definitely. But Whitehall was it was all learning. It was totally a learning experience, and you can tell when you watch the movie. But in terms of views and the amount of money it's made and everything, it's by far our most successful movie, and it cost about $500 to make.
Nice.
But it's been viewed by probably close to 300,000 people or more. It's been on TV up in the Adirondacks. It was on a TV station 4 times, and it was #1 on Amazon Prime's documentary category for a couple weeks. I mean, it's crazy how successful that movie's been.
Well, it is definitely worth the watch. Like I said, we watched the other 2 last night. This afternoon, I got to watch Whitehall, and I tell you, I was expecting Whitehall to be even a little less quality going backward in the timeline, but I felt like, man, you topped it off, and you definitely keep getting better, and I love that about what you're doing with your work, and you can see that progression. But Whitehall is going to stand out to me, and it stood out to me from the title alone. I didn't know anything about that particular story, so the title is catchy. And then, just the whole encounter, the experience that happened there, and your angles and your vision for a film, it's just stunning. I love what you're doing, and I can't recommend enough for people to check you out. Smalltownmonsters.com, I believe, is your website, and you can get all the links and downloads and purchase information there. And I would just encourage every listener to check you out and check out all 3 of your films. I can't wait for Mothman. And now you're talking about UFOs or aliens. Man, you're really broadening the scope. I know you got to be proud of those babies.
Yeah, no, I am. I mean, it's cool too. I think I told Lyle maybe 2 weeks ago, I was like, dude, Boggy is just getting going. Like, Boggy hasn't even found its audience yet. It really hasn't. Like, if you compare it even to Minerva Monster, it hasn't found its audience, which is surprising because the name alone, the name recognition alone, you would think Boggy Creek should automatically draw in a larger audience. But
yeah, definitely.
It hasn't. I keep telling him, I said, as this thing starts to grow and over the coming year, we've already gotten accepted into 4 film festivals, and they're going to start real quick. Like, we have the next one, I think, next weekend. There's one down in Cincinnati that's playing it, and then Horror Hound Film Festival's playing it. We're submitted to film festivals all around the country. We were asked to submit by the Cleveland Film Festival, which is an Oscar qualifying festival.
Nice.
So that's like legit mainstream film festival. And we were asked by the Nashville Film Festival, which is massive. That's a huge, Martin Scorsese has attended that, and it's an Oscar qualifier. So I don't know yet how many of these we're going to get accepted into, because you have to bear in mind we're still a Bigfoot documentary, but it's cool that they're even aware of us and are asking. And I just think as it starts to show at these screenings at the film festivals, the word of mouth on it will get going. And I just feel like in 2017, it's almost going to be like it's a new release for us.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to go back to this. You say it's just a Bigfoot documentary, and that in itself is fascinating. And I believe that topic and the topic of cryptids, especially here in North America, is on the rise again. But I'm still going to go back to your personal stories. you know, the people in the towns and the locations and all that. To me, that's what rounds out your documentaries. It's not just a bloodfest or a special effects driven film. It really is about the story. And as a human race, we crave stories. We love the storytelling experience, and you are immersing us in a storytelling experience. And I love that. So I think you're going to stand out. The longer you go, you're going to stand out even more because you're standing on those stories.
Awesome. Yeah, that's my goal. I mean, what attracts me to these stories is the human element. You know, like the monsters are cool. Like the idea of cryptids is cool, and I love the subject, obviously, but I'm always drawn to the people and their emotional connection to the case and kind of how it affected their lives. That's why we don't do recreations in our movies, really, is the fact that I think that the real drama comes from seeing these people relive these events, you know, through telling their story.
Yeah, I'm drawn back to the story in the Boggy Creek film. It's one of the Crabtree brothers. He's passed away now. You mentioned in your film that he just passed away. Smokey Crabtree. That guy was a hoot. I mean, serious as could be all day long, but man, he was so animated, and the film just came to life on a different level when he started talking. I don't know if you can tell us a little bit, any kind of behind the scenes insight about some of those stories or him or anything on Boggy Creek. We just talked to Lyle a little bit about the Boggy Creek documentary. Give us some of your insights about that film, because that was, like I said, top shelf quality. But when that guy started talking, man, and started telling his story, I was just mesmerized.
I think that scene is like it's twofold what's going on there. Smokey is so animated, like you said, in the way he tells the story that he draws you right into it. And it's kind of a cool, creepy story. You know, he's talking about his son and his son's approached by this hairy monster, and the kid shoots the monster in the face and it doesn't even flinch. And, you know, you're getting this really cool Southern, I mean, his voice is so unique too. He almost sounds like, you know, like you're listening to a Chuck Jones cartoon character talk or something, but
right.
he's so cool. And then the other thing that really drives that scene forward is Matt Harris's illustrations. That's like the first scene we've ever done where it's almost, I think it's close to 4 minutes, where it's just still drawings. And people constantly say they love the cartoon sequence. And I think people watch that scene and they legitimately think those illustrations are moving, but they're not moving. Those are just static illustrations, but right. Matt does such a great job with them. But yeah, that sequence is the scene that people most often seem to talk about. And Smokey Crabtree is a character, and he's someone that's so tied to the Fouke Monster. I was too scared to introduce myself to him when I did see him. I had actually seen him in November. He died, I think, in January. I might be wrong. Someone could correct me on that. It was like January, February, or March. It was somewhere in there. But I had actually been down in Fouke with Lyle at the Boggy Creek Festival, and he was there. Smokey was there, and he sat 10 feet away from me for a few hours, and I was too intimidated to go introduce myself to him.
He's a legend.
So I never got to have any kind of like up close, meeting with Smokey. But when you're making these movies, you come away feeling connected to these people, even if they're gone. You know what I mean? Like, we talked in Beast of Whitehall about a guy named Glenn LaRose, who was a police officer who found a track. And he's in our movie. He's in Beast of Whitehall for maybe a minute. We run some audio about him, where he's talking about finding this track. And his family somehow found our movie without realizing that he was in it. And they watched the movie. And when he started speaking, it was their first time to hear him speak since he had passed away a decade ago.
Wow.
And I guess the family had this like really strong emotional reaction to watching it, and they've become like the biggest Beast of Whitehall fans. They bought T-shirts. They were like emailing us. I mean, they bought copies of the soundtrack last week. So you're well aware while you're making these movies that there's an obligation on our part not to inflate or deflate these people and their impact on the story and the story's impact on them and their lives. And that was especially apparent when we were making Boggy Creek Monster, because of the fact that there are so many of the people in that movie that we're talking about are dead now, are gone, and you have to, obviously do justice by them and take their family's feelings into account and things like that. But yeah, that was the Boggy Creek Monster is unforgettable in terms of the way the filming and all that kind of stuff went. I mean, we have endless hours of stories, and whenever we get together as a crew, we go back and talk about, some of our favorite memories and funny stuff that happened to us down there, because we could write books about it.
That's awesome. And I can say, just from watching the film, you definitely do have a great respect for the people. So I appreciate that about your filmmaking. Give me some insight. I just got a couple more questions for you. I want to respect your time tonight, but what are some of the inspirations you draw from in filmmaking, whether it's industry or film or personal experiences? Where do you draw your inspiration from as a director and as a producer?
Yeah, with storytelling, all of my storytelling technique and things I learned are mostly learned from my time as a newspaper reporter. I freelance reported for some newspapers, and I was a columnist for about 8 years. And so you learn when you're doing that job to tell a story in a very quick, concise manner, because you might only have like 350 words, So as far as storytelling technique and what, the way I make these movies, I'm constantly drawing off that. But if you're talking about, film, I'm a huge fan of like Billy Wilder and David Lean and Steven Spielberg. And I think what those guys all have in common is their movies are epic and they're huge, but they're not, they're not crazy. It's not overblown, or I don't even know the word I'm trying to come up with, but I very often find myself trying to make sure that it never feels like what we're doing is disingenuous or
over-exaggerated,
exaggerated, something, exactly, exaggerated, and that the emotion and the power of what we're doing is coming from the story itself and the people that are telling these stories. So I don't know that I consciously ever draw off those guys, but I do know that those are some of my favorite filmmakers, and that's something I constantly notice about their work. Is if anything, it's kind of understated, but it's still really powerful. And I'm a huge fan of like In Search Of, the old 70s documentaries and the Mysterious Monsters and all those old 70s documentaries. And I think you can see a lot of that in our movies, like especially In Search Of. Our movies definitely kind of feel, and we've had people say that before, like, do you purposely try to make your films feel like an old 1970s television documentary, which could come across as a complete insult. And maybe it is, but I always take it as a compliment. So who knows?
No, I think it's cool. I think your inspiration, from people like Spielberg, things that come to mind is that they're still human. As big as they are, they're human, they're grounded, and we can relate to them. We connect with that as a human race.
I mean, I wouldn't take it as an insult. As much fun as some of the TV shows are these days that are out there right now, like on Sci-Fi and such, as much fun as those are, there's a big difference between those really dramatic, over-the-top, show the same shot 5 times repeatedly versus what you're doing, which is, again, very down-to-earth and very, it speaks for itself.
I think what we're doing is a reaction to that stuff. I really do. Like, I think more than anything, Small Town Monsters, and I don't think it started out that way. Like, when we made Minerva, I wasn't saying this is the anti-Finding Bigfoot. It wasn't like that. But I think over time, it's almost become that, because people like the way we're telling these stories, and so I'm always conscious of that. And everyone that works on these is conscious of that at this point. Because even the guys, my cinematographer, Zach, we've been buddies since we were kids. I mean, we met because we both wanted to make movies. And Zach isn't into Bigfoot or cryptids or any of this stuff at all. But he's locked into the way we tell stories now. And he'll call me on it if he notices me going kind of contrary to what we've done before. He'll be like, well, do you really think that fits within, the parameters that we've kind of established for the series before? And he's not really into this stuff, but he's aware of what we're working with and the community and what the community expects from us. And he's also aware of like the fact that since he's not a cryptid enthusiast, he's aware of what he would respond to if he just stumbled upon one of our movies, cruising the TV one night.
Right. No, that's all very good. And let me just make a statement. we are doing, as a part of this episode, we're also doing a big giveaway with some of Lyle's books on the Boggy Creek Monster. We're going to pick up a copy of your documentary, Boggy Creek Monster, and give that away as kind of a definitive collection on that legend, on that creature, the Fouke Monster. And so we're pretty excited about that. That being said, I'd like you to take us a little forward for a couple of minutes. And what insights can you give us? What expectations can you give us about your Mothman project? And maybe even further than that, your next film after that. Give us some teasers. Get us excited about that.
Yeah. The Mothman story was one that I'd always wanted to tell, because that Mothman Prophecies movie, the Richard Gere movie, was, I kind of credit that movie with being the reason I'm even into these subjects. I saw that movie in theaters a whole bunch when it first came out, and actually with Zach, the guy that is helping me shoot it, and we kept going back to see it. So I was always aware of it, but last summer, we went down for the Mothman Festivals because Small Town Monsters had a booth, and I got to talking to a police officer who'd actually grown up in that area, and he told me a story about a girl he went to grade school with, and she was in 6th grade, and she had actually died on the bridge, and in fact, her body was one of the only 2 bodies they weren't able to find from the Silver Bridge collapse.
Wow.
When he was telling me the story, he got really emotional, almost in tears, kind of thing, where he's recounting this for me. I guess him and some classmates went down to the river and they planted a tree by the river for her. And you could tell it still really hit him when he was recounting this for me. And so that was kind of what drew me to the story, was the fact that this wasn't just a monster story. It had this really tragic, sad event that kind of culminated, all this monster stuff in the 13 months leading up to the bridge collapse. It's all part of one story. And I'm not connecting the bridge collapse to the Mothman, but it's a fact that over that 13-month span of time, there was this insane, amount of events that were going on that started with the Mothman, and then there were UFOs, and then there were Men in Black, and then in December of 1967, the bridge collapsed and 46 lives are lost. So I wanted to make a movie that would catalog all that, document all that stuff, and also the emotional impact that's had on the town. And then something we often get asked about with the Mothman stories is how do just like normal people feel about the Mothman now? So we kind of want to answer that question too, because people that lost loved ones on the bridge aren't necessarily crazy about the fact that there's this tourism industry there that's kind of grown up around the Mothman. So our movie will kind of document everything that happened over this 13-month span of time from 1966 to 1967, from the Scarberry Mallet, TNT area sightings all the way up to the bridge collapse. And then we'll do our bookends like we do in the other movies, and we'll show the town then and we'll show the town now. I don't know. I think it's going to be a really concise, a very concise chronological look at the Mothman events as told through our lens, which is down to earth. And we've managed to compile a bunch of audio interviews and old video interviews with original witnesses. I think when it's all said and done, we're going to have 6 of the original witnesses. It might be more. It might be 7 or 8 of the original witnesses in one movie, which, I don't think that's been done before. In fact, I know that hasn't been done before. So I'm excited about that fact. But what I wanted to do is make a movie about, that span of time. And so that's the Mothman movie. And then the Invasion on Chestnut Ridge movie is a film that starts with the Kecksburg UFO crash that happened in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. And that was in 1965. And then it'll kind of explore Kecksburg, and it's part of this area of Pennsylvania, this 100-mile stretch of ridge called Chestnut Ridge. And basically Chestnut Ridge is kind of it's similar to something like the Bridgewater Triangle, or I guess the Bermuda Triangle, where it seems like there's just a lot of weird stuff that happens on this ridge. All sorts of, UFO activity and missing people and Bigfoot sightings and Thunderbird sightings and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm saying when I'm saying it's going to be a little different from our other movies. I think it's going to be a little bit, I guess in a way it'll be a little more similar to Boggy Creek, in that Boggy Creek kind of starts in the 60s and brings you all the way up till today, kind of over the course of the movie. And I think that's probably what Invasion's going to be a little more like. But it's a story that fascinates me, not just because I wanted to do something in Pennsylvania and work with Stan Gordon, but it fascinates me because I don't know a lot about the story yet. And typically we go into these stories knowing a ton, being very educated on them. And this is something where we're going to learn a lot as we go along. And the reason we're going to be learning so much as we go along is some of the witnesses we're interviewing haven't been talked about, written about anywhere else. So this is going to be our experimental film.
Wow. It all is very cool. Sounds very exciting. And in talking about your films, just realizing how human they are, how grounded they are, I don't want to take away from the fact that they are still very exciting, very intense. There's a lot of creepy moments in these films. So, if any of our listeners are looking for that type, I think you're going to get both sides of it. You're going to get the monster, the creepy, the spooky stuff. You're also going to get the human element. So you've got a great balance in your films, and I'm very excited to see the Mothman and then the Invasion films come out very soon. So Seth Breedlove, ladies and gentlemen, filmmaker, storyteller, all-around great guy. I encourage you to go check out the Kickstarter. And you said just go to Kickstarter.com and punch in Mothman. That's going to bring you to your listing. Also check out smalltownmonsters.com. All the information you need about all of these films is right there. So Seth, is there anything else you want to share with us or throw our way or to our listeners at this point?
The first 3 films we made are available in a box set too. So if people want to experience like everything at once, you can buy a box set called Bigfoot, which is Minerva, Whitehall, and Boggy Creek. And also the website's crappy because I haven't had time to really, because I'm running everything myself at this point. So I need to update that, but I typically try to direct people to the Facebook page if they want to stay a little more up to date, and they can interact and stuff with us on there. So
okay, and that's facebook.com Small Town Monsters?
It's SML Town Monsters, yeah.
SML Town Monsters. Okay, very good. Seth, thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. Really appreciate it. You've got some great insight, amazing vision, and I just look forward to everything that you put out from this point forward.
Awesome. Thanks, man.